Hello, welcome to Northampton Economics Tutor website. Today, I'm introducing macroeconomics and government policy to you, and the purpose of this presentation is to help you understand keywords in macro. So the first set of keywords we are looking at is micro. We know from our previous topics that micro is the study of individual market within an economy, which can be from housing, labor, transport, sports, and leisure, etc. Macro, on the other hand, is when we are studying economy as a whole. Example, the price level in an economy and the total amount of goods and services produced, level of unemployment, etc. GDP is to measure the total amount of goods and services produced, and if we measure them at the current market price, we call it nominal GDP. What I've done over here is I've highlighted these keywords in purple, which if used in examination scripts is the use of keywords which examiners normally emphasize on. An increase in GDP is an increase over the previous years or the previous years. So let's say, for example, if the GDP has gone up in 2013, then we are saying it is over the previous year, which was 2012. If we adjust the GDP for price level or inflation, we call it the real GDP. If the GDP is divided by the population of a country, it is called GDP per capita. Inflation is the increase in price level over the previous year. Normally on BBC News, when you hear that the inflation has gone up by 2.5 or 2.6%, what they mean is the level of prices have gone up as compared to the previous 12 months. Then inflation can further be defined into two categories, which is cost push inflation and demand pull inflation. Inflation in the prices of raw materials like petrol, gas, and other commodities, even national minimum wage, will push the price of finished good up. On the other hand, demand pull inflation normally experienced during economic boom when people have jobs and have high disposable income, so they want to consume more. They're demanding more of commodities. This results in increase in their prices. We at times refer to this situation as overheating in the economy. So how do we measure inflation? There are two measures that are used in UK: the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, also known as the Harmonized Index of Consumer Prices, which calculates the average price increase of a percentage of basket of about 600 different goods and services. The UK body or the organization which has the responsibility is the Office of National Statistics, also known as ONS. It collects the information on prices of these commodities from 120,000 different retailers. The formula used to calculate CPI is the geometric mean instead of the arithmetic mean like the RPI. Henceforth, CPI is always less than the RPI. The rationale is that this accounts for changes in consumer spending behavior as a result of differences in price changes. So, the difference between the CPI and the RPI, CPI is always lower than the RPI, is known as the formula effect. The biggest criticism of CPI is that people seem it to be less effective measure than the RPI because it excludes housing cost and can be manipulated by the government. On the other hand, Retail Price Index, which has been used for more than 70 years by the British government and is still used, includes the housing cost, and it is used such as the amount payable on index-linked securities like government bonds or even for the pension. So the UK state pension 2012 is indexed by the higher of RPI, CPI, or 2.5%. Why do we measure inflation? If you look at the picture over here, and you can see the man is saying, "You salary, why are you not growing up when all your friends are now grown up?" So you can look at the fuel, bread, meat. So if the price of commodities goes up, but the salary is not increasing, then we are actually getting poorer. And that is why inflation is used for negotiation with employers for salary. I will leave it for you to research and find out what hyperinflation is and state the UK's targeted inflation rate. The other set of keywords is more to do with the exchange rate or balance of payments. So I've put on a picture of a liner with lots of cargoes or containers we can see over here. China shipping line. Alright, what this means is we are talking about balance of payments is a record of all financial dealings over time period between consumers, businesses and governments in one country, which is UK, with the others. That can be United States, European Union, China and rest of the world. The balance of payments has further two accounts: capital account and current account. What we take into consideration in capital account is the flows of money for savings, investment, speculation and currency stabilization. Current account, you take into account purchase and sale of goods and services, investment incomes and net transfers, also called the balance of trade. As UK, we would like to have a balanced balance of payments or a balanced balance of trade. We will go into more detail later videos. Exports is the goods and services sold by British firms to the rest of the world. On the other hand, imports is the goods and services consumed by British consumers, firms, and governments abroad. Exports is an essential component, and to find out net exports, all we do is exports take away imports. Appreciation and depreciation of pound is very crucial to understand, especially when we are going to foreign countries for a holiday. If we are traveling into euro, we'll have to purchase euro and give pounds. So if the pound is strong, then we get more euros for our pounds. So appreciation, if there is more demand for pound, then it will strengthen, appreciate, meaning that imports will be cheaper and we will be paying less for foreign goods like traveling abroad. However, it will affect our exports as they will become more expensive. Foreign buyers have to buy more to buy pounds to be able to pay for our goods. Moving on, employment. So what is employment and unemployment? Employment is the condition of having paid work. However, unemployment is when people are able or available and willing to work at the going wage rate but cannot find a job despite an active search for work. And we can have voluntary and involuntary unemployment. Voluntary is when a worker chooses not to accept a job at the going wage rate. And involuntary unemployment is which occurs when a worker is willing to accept a job at the going wage rate but cannot get an offer. So for voluntary unemployment to exist, we need to understand, which is quite important, strong incentives to remain unemployed, such as higher rates of benefits or income tax that act as a disincentive to work. The worker would feel better off not working. So we have people who do not want to go back into employment because they find that the benefits are enough for them to live on. Or people would not want to work hard because the more money you earn, you might be paying a lot more proportion into your taxes. Taxes then act as a disincentive for people to work. There is underemployment or underemployed. For workers who are working less hours than they can work, workers doing a job of less ability than they are qualified to do, and hence earning less wages. And four more ways of defining employment is frictional, cyclical, seasonal, and structural. Frictional is when a person or a worker is moving between two jobs. The obvious reason being they might be preparing for the new job, or it's the difference between the finishing of the last job and then before you start the new job. There might be a time gap in between. Cyclical employment is when an economy is in recession. Workers are being made redundant by the firm, so there is less demand in the economy. These firms might be getting rid of their existing stock than manufacturing more. Seasonal, a good example is the ice cream industry. There is peak demand for ice cream during the summertime, so there is more employment during spring and summer. Come autumn and winter, as there is less demand, workers are laid off. Structural is when a particular industry closes down due to reasons such as non-competitive and jobs have moved abroad. For example is we cannot have miners from Yorkshire because coal and mining used to be an important industry in Yorkshire, but we cannot put them into the banking industry without upgrading their skills. So they have to go back into education to upgrade their skills so that they can then work into banking industry or maybe IT industry. So structural is workers not being able to do another job because of lack of skills. How does government measure unemployment within the economy? There are two methods, and every month we have these figures out on the BBC. First one being Labour Force Survey, which is based on the International Labour Organization method, where a survey is sent out to 60,000 people. They are unemployed or not, they are looking for a job. However, this is not a true representative, so this can be argued that due to sampling errors, etc. The second one is doing a claimant count for job seeker allowance. Many people are claiming seeker allowance, and so we can say many are unemployed. But there is an issue with claimant count is that it misses out many people who are interested in finding work, have searched for work in the recent period. They don't meet all of the criteria for claiming and therefore are not included in the monthly unemployment count, so they're not paid job seeker allowance. We need to understand the economic cycle. We can see on the diagram, on the y-axis we've got the real GDP, on the x-axis we've got the time, and the straight line over here is the long run trend growth, and the actual curve of the economy. So if we are above the long run trend growth and on top of the actual growth, it's called the peak. Going down, it's recession, and when it's going back towards the above of the long run growth, then we call it recovery, and then we hit boom again. The gap between the actual curve and the LRTG is known as the negative output gap. When it's below the LRTG, above the LRTG and the actual growth is known as the positive output gap. Economic growth is an increase in the productive capacity of an economy, so being able to produce more goods and services, Another way of measuring economic growth is the increase in GDP rates. You are measuring, if you're comparing two countries, then the best way to take population into account, because you cannot compare UK with United States of America, is to look at GDP per capita, which is GDP divided by population. Economic boom, it is when real GDP grows faster than the long run trend growth, which is about 2.5% for UK. The economy is said to be overheating, meaning that the level of unemployment is low, people have more disposable income, and there is an increasing aggregate demand, which should lead to demand pull inflation. The other question is 2 successive quarters of decline in real GDP in UK. We experience high level of unemployment, low interest rates, and falling house prices. However, recently in UK, since 2008, we are now in 2012-2013, we have been experiencing increased price level due to imported cost-push inflation, as prices of commodities like oil, gas, etc. have gone up. I've explained before when I was explaining the diagram, positive output gap is when the actual growth is above the LRTG and there is a high level of employment. Negative output gap, on the other hand, is the level of actual growth which is below the LRTG and we experience high level of unemployment and falling output. Long run trend growth, over the period of time, we can see that the economy should be growing steadily up. In UK, it has been about 2.5%. The macroeconomic objectives of the British government. So the British government has certain objectives, and that is how they frame their policy. So the first macroeconomic objective is the economic growth, which should be as high as possible, though there is no set target. But over the last 50 years, we've experienced economic growth of roughly about 2.5%. On the other hand, countries like India, China have had between 7 to 10%. Unemployment, we would like to have low level of unemployment, but it is quite impossible to have 0% unemployment. Why? Because if people have too much money, then what will happen is there will be high inflation because of demand pull inflation, and also there will always be someone who is not willing to work whatever the price may be. The target for unemployment is, there is no set target in the Britain, but 1.5% seems good, though it is not an official target as I've written down. Inflation is the only economic objective which has a specific target of 2%. The balance of payments should be balanced, as I've explained in the earlier slides, that if the balance of payment is not balanced, then our exports can be uncompetitive or imports can be too expensive. Distribution of income must be more equal so that people have a good standard of living, and that is why we have a progressive taxation system, meaning that the more you earn, the more taxes or more money you contribute towards the social welfare of the state. The government has also set itself certain environmental targets, though it is quite difficult to eliminate pollution and environmental damage. However, the extent of damage can be limited through government policy like pollution permits. Is about hence for the questions that has been given within the notes. So the first question is about comment or compare briefly the performance of GDP of the G7 since the recession of 2008. What I'm looking for is, you've been provided a graph with GDP of G7 countries. You have to identify 2 significant points that during this time this country has gone down or has had negative economic growth, or they've been having positive economic growth, and then explain why those 2 significant points, why that has happened. Then comment on how economic growth is linked with low levels of unemployment and how technological advancement affects productivity and employment. So from experience, you need to explain how technology has improved productivity and also reduced staffing needs and impacted level of unemployment. If you look over here, I've put a picture of myself in one of the Tesco self-checkout machines, and we know that at self-checkout machines, you've probably got just one shop assistant helping people on 10 different tills. So the productivity of that person within that time frame has gone from 1 is to 10 with the use of technology. Next question is about explaining the different trade-offs among government objectives. Example, economic growth, inflation, and unemployment. What I'm looking for is, you need to explain why high level of economic growth can result in high inflation and poor be worse off, etc. So you're looking at the difference between the 3. Using the given graphs, investigate the relationship between unemployment, economic growth, and inflation. Pretty much the above question. You need to explain the relationship, trade-offs between the three using or applying the graphs in this case.